everybody. Hi, can I have your attention? Then we can start. Great. Welcome to our fourth UX Psychology Meetup today here at WeWork. Thank you, WeWorks, we can be here. Very nice to see all of you today. It's glad we're all sharing the same interest. My name is Caro. I'm a project manager and I'm working for Tållbeard, the agency that hosts this meetup today. We invited some great speakers. We have Lisa over here and Tina over there. I'm going to introduce you later as well. Tonight we want to connect people with the same interest and who are passionate about psychology, user experience, human behavior, design and technology. And I hope you had time already to connect with each other, and we'll have some more time later on. Okay, then let's start. This is our agenda. What I'm doing right now is the 5-minute intro, and I'm going to keep doing that after I showed you the agenda for a little bit. Lisa Marie is going to start and will tell us something about the psychology of choice and how choice affects our decisions. Then you have 10 to 15 minutes to ask some questions and get some answers from Lisa. Then we do a 5-minute break. You can refill up your drinks. I hope you already have drinks. And then we'll have Tina talking about financial psychology and why we're all weird when it gets about money. Then you'll have another 10 to 15 minutes for questions. And then around 7:30, you can just use the time to network a little bit, connect with each other, and of course have some drinks. We have a strict end at 8 o'clock. So we're going to close this event at 8 o'clock strictly. But of course, there are lots of bars here. We are right in Mitte. I hope you know that if you have questions, ask me. We can probably show you around otherwise. Good. So first thing I'm going to do, I will introduce you to Tållbeard, the host tonight. We have 3 departments just under one roof. So we have the cognitive laboratory, who does biometric user research and testing, and we're using different sensor technologies to achieve valid results about emotions from users. For example, we use face expression analysis, eye tracking, or galvanic skin response. Our second department is the Tållbeard Studio, and this is our UX and UI department. We're focused on product and service design during the whole entire customer journey. And the last department we have is Prod, and as the name says, we're doing prototypes, or we develop prototypes. Yes, prototypes, yeah, right. For any human-machine interface. So if you have any questions about those departments or Tållbeard itself, ask us or my team over there. We're happy to help you. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly say why we're actually here. So why do we run UX Psychology Meetups? So the UX of digital products and services can be improved by psychologic research results, especially for the UX design. It's extremely important to have a basic understanding of the human behavior. And this knowledge can, of course, improve the success of a service or a project, and as it will increase the usability and the interaction rate. As psychology shows, there are no limits to the user expectations, but at the same time, the user is very limited in his abilities. Users are creatures of habit, as we all are, we know that, and they're constantly striving for happiness and are excessively selective. And UX designers must, of course, be aware of those facts so they can create digital products and services, especially for the needs and desires of those users. And that's why we're actually here. We just want to connect. What we want to achieve with these meetups is that we want to encourage exchange between user experience and the field of psychology. And that's why I'm handing over to Lisa, to our first speaker tonight. Is this turned on? That's turned on, yeah.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for welcoming me. So Basically, I've come over from Manchester at about 5 o'clock this morning, so if I start to fall asleep halfway through, you know what. Let me get my slides on. Okay. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the psychology of choice. So how do choices influence our decisions that we make, and how can we actually change those decisions as well? So I'm going to start by asking you a simple question. How many decisions do you think that you make in a typical day about what you eat? So just have a think about that for a moment. 14, okay. It's actually 226 in a day, okay? So a lot more probably than you thought. So bearing in mind that we make that amount of decisions about eating, how many decisions do you think you make about everything in a typical day? 35,000, okay. So you're probably thinking, there's no way that I make 35,000 decisions in a day. I would definitely know about that, and I wouldn't have time for anything else. I would be so busy doing this. But don't worry, that's because most of them are actually due to system 1, which is our sort of unconscious brain. It's natural, it's intuitive, it's instinctive. And this just happens without you having much control over it. You're not really conscious about what's happening here. And then we've got this other system, system 2, which is the one that you are more aware of. This is the one where you know what you're doing, you're aware of that decision that you're making. So this tends to be more slow, more logical, more effortful. And this is the one where, you know, if you're choosing, I don't know, what toaster to buy on Amazon, this is the one that you're using. So I thought we'd do a quick experiment, and you'll have to do this in English for it to work, okay? So if you just shout out, what is a common abbreviation for Coca-Cola? Coke, okay, brilliant. What do we call the sound a frog makes? A croak. What's a comedian's funny story? A joke. What do we call the white of an egg? A yolk? Are you sure? Yeah. So most of you probably said yolk for that because it rhymes with all the previous answers, but it's actually an egg white. And that's an example of your system 1 kicking into action now. How about this one? So a bat and the ball cost £1.10 together. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. So how much do you think the ball costs? Is it harder to work out this one? So this is an example of your system 2. This is where you're having to think about the answer. And actually a lot of people get this one wrong, so they'll think that the ball costs 10 pence when it actually costs 5 pence. Is that right? Yeah, so it costs 5 pence. When it comes to making decisions, we use this part of our brain here. So this part right at the front, the prefrontal cortex. So if you ever meet someone who's had this area of the brain damaged, they might have difficulty making decisions. They may also have some problems with their personality and expressing their personality, and cognitive behaviour as well. They'll have some issues there. A rational decision is better than an impulsive decision. How many of you agree with this? Just put your hands up. No, okay. Well, a study was done about this in IKEA. So they studied shoppers shopping at IKEA for a sofa, and they found that the people that spent longer analysing their options were actually less satisfied. So the more rational these people were, the less satisfied that they actually were with their purchase at the end of it. So there's some evidence that being rational is actually not as good for you, for your happiness in making that indecision. So you may be better listening to that system 1 brain sometimes. And choice is really deeply rooted in our culture and our beliefs, and this is because we believe that choice equals freedom. And you'll see this if any of you do user research, you'll often find that if you ask people, how many options would you like on this website, they'll just go, the more the better, the more you give me the better. But actually when we analyse behaviour, that's not the case. Less is more, basically. But people like choice, and they'll always tell you that the more the better. And choice is good when we know what we want. It gives us the freedom to express ourselves. It gives us the freedom to actually choose something that meets our needs and our desires. But the problem is that we assume that some choice is good and that more choice is better. Whereas actually it's not always better. So I really like this image because I think this is all of us when we go and buy a chocolate bar and we can't decide what to get. We like the fact there's lots of chocolate bars there, but actually it becomes really difficult to make a decision because there's just too much. So I thought we'd have a look at buying a kettle, because a kettle's quite a boring thing, isn't it? When it breaks down, you get a new one, you think it's going to be an easy thing to do. So you go on Amazon, you type in a kettle, and actually you get 4,000 results for a kettle, and suddenly it becomes this really big task. And you find out about all these features and functionality that you've never heard of before, and suddenly they become really important in this buying process. And before you know it, you've got this list of things that you need to mark against, and you're comparing kettles left, right and centre, and it becomes this long task that takes you far longer than you thought it was going to do. And the same with a red dress. So imagine you want a red dress, boys, for your Saturday night out. And you type it into Google, you've got all these results. So you think, I know, I'll go on ASOS instead. So you go to your favourite website, and there's still 20,000 dresses. So you start to narrow it down, red dress, we've got nearly 1,500. There's a lot to go through there. So we've tried to narrow it down, but there's still too much choice there. It's still going to be difficult to find a red dress. Well, it'll be easy to find a red dress, but not the one that you want because there's just too much. So what happens is the more choice that we give people, the less likely they actually are to act. And this is called The Paradox of Choice. It's by Barry Schwartz. He's written a book on it that's really interesting if you want to read more. So you can see that the more choices that we have, the less ability we actually have to make a choice and to act on that choice. So this is highly correlated. And I don't know if you've heard of the jam study by Sheena Iyengar. She did a study, 6 jars of jam she had in the stall versus 24 jars of jam. She found out more people stopped at the stall with 24, but more people bought at the stall with 6. So more, it goes back to that thing where people like choice, but then they don't necessarily act on it because there's just too much. So what happens when people are offered too much choice is they can end up making worse decisions because they're not able to compare all the options. They then feel more dissatisfied with the choice that they make because they've not been able to compare all the options. So they're always thinking, oh, what if that one was better? Did I make the right choice? Would option B, would I have been more satisfied with that? And that can actually cause us to become paralysed and not make a choice at all because there's just too much to compare and too much to go through. So we just think, oh, it's too difficult, I'm going to leave it for later, or I'll just do it another day. And there's some famous people that know about this. So we've got Barack Obama, who tries to pare down his choices to what he's eating and what he's wearing. And Steve Jobs did a similar thing as well. So I think he used to wear the same black top every day. He used to, just to quit that decision process. One less decision to make, one less cognitive load. And how you go about decisions depends on your decision-making style. So there are two main styles of making decisions. So you could be a maximizer, or you could be a satisficer, or you're probably a bit of a mix of both. So maximizers are the types of people that spend lots of time and effort finding the best thing. They'll examine every option, they'll worry that something else might have been better. They will have a stronger preference to go back and revise their choice afterwards. So if they buy that red dress, they'll be more likely to return it afterwards. And they're generally less satisfied with the choice that they make as well. Whereas satisficers accept the good enough option. So they've maybe got some criteria, and as long as something meets that criteria, they're happy with it. And they don't suffer from this buyer's remorse that maximizers tend to do. So it's quite good to be a satisficer, you're probably more happy. But we quite often fluctuate depending on the purchase that we're making and the consequence of that purchase. And things like Instagram are making us more maximizers because, buying a kettle, if it was just going to be you and your visitors seeing it, isn't such a big deal. But if you're planning on posting that on social media, suddenly you're concerned about, how's the world going to perceive you? Does that fit your image? And so this is causing people to become more overloaded with making decisions and having problems doing that and making us maximizers. And people also tend to maximise when a decision involves the happiness of others. So things like holidays, booking the family holidays. We do a lot of research at my agency in travel. And I always find that the mums who are booking the holidays, tends to be the mums, they feel a lot of pressure because, they're going to spend a lot of money on this holiday. It's the annual family thing. And there's a lot of pressure on them to get that right. That's an experience that the whole family are going to remember. So if that's not a good experience, that's going to put a lot of pressure on them. So you find that a lot of time is spent actually choosing holidays, weeks, if not months. Okay, so I've just got a little video here for you of how Apple do things. So they're quite good at satisfying both maximizers and satisficers because they give you all the detail that you need if you're a maximizer, but satisficers, they can just go with the nice imagery and the key facts that they need to make their decision. So they satisfy both types of purchase decisions. Okay, and then we've got some nice filters on ASOS that again help people to make the right choice. They help them to narrow down those options. So good filters can really help people. So 76 is a lot better than the 1500 that we had previously. Okay, so just have a look at this for a second. So most people looking at this will read this first, and then this one, and then this one last. So the purpose of this slide is to show you that through design and how you actually place items, how big you make them, how bold you make them, you can control what people read. So we can actually influence their decisions and their choices through design. And this is a nice example from Basecamp. They use a similar concept where you're likely to see the big text here and this one and the nice call to action that they've got here. So they're trying to guide your attention. They're trying to guide the decision that you're going to make through the design of that page. our choices be influenced by how we pay? And I guess Tina might be talking about this next. What do you think? Yeah? Definitely. So as a society, we've obviously moved away from cash. Nowadays, we purchase more and more on card. We don't just purchase more on card, but we purchase more things on our cards as well. And we spend up to 100% more. So this is quite worrying. And the thing that's happening here is that the credit card is actually hiding the pain factor. So when you've got a wallet full of cash and you take some of that cash out to pay with, you feel a sense of loss, and you actually feel a physical loss as well. You feel the weight of your wallet getting lighter. Whereas when you pay by card, it's just a tap, isn't it now? You don't even put your PIN in. So it's taking away that pain and making it easier to buy things that we don't necessarily need, making it too easy. Also, as well, it's worth pointing out that this system 1 brain, this emotional brain, doesn't really understand things like interest rates, APRs, and so it doesn't really take into account the impact of spending a lot on here as well. We'll just figure out how to pay it later, that's what it says. And our choices can also be influenced by how information is framed. So these are exactly the same, but we could say that one's 75% lean and one's 25% fat. And this one sounds a hell of a lot healthier, doesn't it? This one, 25% fat, doesn't really sound very appetizing. It sounds like it's really fattening. But effectively, they're the same. It's just how we phrase it to the consumer that's going to influence their purchase. Here we've got anchoring bias. So we've got 2 cars, both £25,000. But one has a reduction, so it was 28, now it's 25. So this one, they've anchored the price at 28 before showing you at 25. So this one feels like it's more of a bargain, doesn't it? You feel like, you know, despite the fact that they're the same price, you more like to go with this. I fall for this one all the time. I like a bargain. So this is called anchoring bias, and again, it can influence people's choice. So I say, you know, if these were 2 bottles of wine in the supermarket, one was £8, I'm saying pounds, you'll have to forgive me, and one was 12 and now it's 8, you'd be more likely to go for this one because you think, well, that's worth more, it's going to be better wine, I'll go for this one. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but you know, if it's the end of the day, you're tired, you're supposed to be on a diet, you're supposed to be choosing the apple, but you're just so tired, your willpower's depleted, you're much more likely to go for the cake in that instance. So our choices can also be influenced by how we feel, the context that we're in, even the route you take home from work in the evening, you know, whether you pass a takeaway or not, and you know, if it's a Friday night and you've got a routine of behaviour of going to a takeaway on Friday night, all these sorts of things, your environment and your willpower affect your choices. And emotions are also a key driver of the choices we make. So how we actually feel. So we make choices as well based on how we expect them to make us feel in the future. So for example, if you're ordering online, you'll be thinking, oh, how's that red dress going to make me feel on Saturday night? You know, how's that kettle going to make me feel when I'm making that nice dinner for everyone on Sunday for the family? So you're not just thinking about how you feel now, but how is it actually going to make me feel in the future? So how can you communicate emotion in what you do, in what you design? And our choices aren't just based on how they're going to make us feel in the future, but actually, how have past experiences made us feel, and how is that going to influence the choices that we make now? So one experience that I've had is with Yodel. And Yodel, years ago, I had a bad experience with them. And now, if I'm shopping online, I'll actively avoid companies that use Yodel. So, you know, if that's something, say, for example, you work for a company and they've had some bad incidents in the past that have affected the reputation, how can you communicate that that product or services has improved, and how can you evidence that? So we also have this thing called loss aversion when we're making decisions. We have this desire to avoid pain. And this is the reason, basically. So if you imagine I gave you £100, the pleasure factor in that would be this amount here. Now, if I took £100 away from you, let's just do this here, it wouldn't be an equal weight of feeling for that loss. It's actually double. So you feel double the amount of pain for the same amount of loss as a gain. So this explains why this avoidance that we have of feeling negativity, of feeling loss, affects us so deeply, and why we struggle so much with choices, because we don't want to make the wrong choice. And in a design, you can see people using this fear of loss in things like this. So I've just taken this example. It's an old example actually from Apple. But you can see what they're doing here. So we've got one here where the default is this system, and then you can choose to upgrade, and again here, versus this one where the default is the upgrade and you actually choose to downgrade. So with this one, people are less likely to downgrade because it plays on that fear of loss, or what am I going to lose? Or what if I make the wrong decision? What if I choose that and then it's my fault if I've made the wrong decision and I have to live with that? So more people will convert with this than if you gave them this option, made them upgrade. So it's quite a little clever technique. This is a nice little study. So if you've heard of Dan Ariely, he did this famous study with 100 students, and he asked them to choose which subscription that they would choose given these three options. So we had the economist.com subscription here, the cheapest one, print subscription 125, print and web 125, okay? So out of those 100 students, we had 16 that chose the top one, the .com subscription, and then 84% chose the bottom one, the print and the web. So no one chose this middle option. It's not really surprising, is it? Because why would you when you can get this for the same price? So he thought, well, if no one's choosing this one, let's just get rid of it because there's no point it being there. No one wants to buy it, so we'll just remove it. But it turns out it is useful because the figures switch. So now we've got a lot more people buying this top one with the .com subscription and only 32% buying the bottom one. So that middle one actually served a purpose. So it kind of did this. So showing a slightly worse option. So if we said that this was the bottom one and this was the top one, showing a slightly worse option of the bottom one actually made the bottom one look better, made it look more appealing. And we all know that people look at reviews when they're making choices. This is called social proof. And you might think that the aim for a product is always to be 5 stars. Now that's not always the case, because what they found is that there's a tipping point. So it peaks out at about 4.4 for the likelihood of purchase, but then it's almost like when it gets more than that, it's too good to be true for people. So 4.2 to 4.4 is the ideal average. And people are actively seeking out these reviews and actively seeking out the negative reviews as well. But yeah, if you've got all 5-star reviews, that's probably going to go against you. It's good to have a few negatives in there as well. And reviews are actually more influential for expensive purchases. So if something's cheap, it's not much money, people are more likely to just try it and buy it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's not really affected them as much. But as I described earlier with the holiday purchase, if it's something that's a lot of money, people are more likely to be influenced by things like reviews. So you can see here that for the cheap thing here. That's, there's not much effect. But when something's more expensive, you have a higher likelihood of purchasing for the star rating. And the ideal number of reviews varies as well. So what we find is that when you've got longer reviews, you actually need less of them. But if you've got shorter reviews, you need a lot more of them to have the same impact on people. So it's not just the reviews and the star ratings, it's actually the length of those reviews as well. Okay, so I've just got an example here, again of Apple. I think Apple do this really well, of utilising both System 1 and System 2. So they use a lot of emotion in their marketing, in their website as well. So they utilise the System 1, emotion. They've got the option to pay on finance that we've seen. It negates that pain factor of paying. They also use System 2 because they've got all the technical details in there for those maximisers who want to compare all the details. They limit the choice as well. They've got very clear differences between their products, so it's very easy to see what the differences are. They give you a sense that you can do anything using their products as well, so they convey that sense of freedom. And they've got a lot of support as well, so they've got stores that you can walk into, they've got people you can contact online, so it limits that opportunity for buyer's remorse as well that people have. I always think it's very interesting in their marketing that they never, you see the big posters and they never sell the phone, they sell what you can do with a phone, don't they? So they sell like the nice photograph that you can take of Mount Kilimanjaro, that kind of thing, but they never actually sell the phone. It's really interesting. Okay, so we know that we like choice. Choice is freedom. Choice is liked by people. But when we get it, we might not always want it. We might not always like that choice. So here's an example. So they asked people without cancer whether they would want to choose the treatment if they did have cancer. So 65% of people said that, yes, I would like the ability to choose my treatment if I had cancer. And then when people did have cancer, they asked them the same question, and actually it totally flipped. So 88% would prefer not to choose their treatment. So actually only 12%. So it would be 65% versus 12% wanting to choose treatment, which is a big difference. So sometimes we're not very good at predicting our own behaviour and our own choices either. So the problem with choice is that people only have themselves to blame when they're making a choice. The example with the mum buying the holiday for the family, if they have a bad time, she feels that responsibility is hers, it's her fault. So what happens when you have too many options is that you're responsible for what happens to you. So this is an interesting thing. What if choices are actually made for us rather than giving us the responsibility? Would that help things at all? So these are organ donations by countries, and you can see that there's a massive difference, isn't there? So we've got these countries on the left-hand side that aren't giving as much donations of organs versus these countries that are giving a lot. And why is that? Why might that be? Well, it's due to design. So the countries on the left were given this option in a form. So it says, check the box if you want to participate in the organ donor programme. And what happens is that, giving your organs is quite a difficult decision. It's quite a hard decision for people. So they just leave it unticked because they don't want to choose at this particular point in time. So they end up not giving their organs because they don't opt in. And the countries on the right were given this version. check the box if you don't want to participate in the organ donor programme. So basically what happens is they exhibit the same behaviour, they don't tick the box, but instead of not giving organs, they're now opted in by default. So same behaviour, but now totally different output. So basically the framing effect influences our decisions. How we frame information can impact what people do and how they behave. So here's another example. When we're told, if we have a major operation, you've got an 80% chance of surviving versus a 20% chance of dying, twice as many people will opt for the surgery when they're told there's an 80% chance of surviving. Yeah, again, they're the same piece of information, just framed differently. And how about the environment? So there was a famous study done in a hotel, and they phrased things differently. So they had one phrase that was help save the environment. So some of the people staying in the hotel had this message in. So 35% actually recycled their towels if they had this message. Some guests were told, the majority of guests in this hotel reuse their towels. So comparing them to other guests in the hotel, increased the percentage of people reusing their towels now to 44%. And then they changed it again. So they said the majority of guests who have stayed in this room reuse their towels. So we've gone from hotel to room now. And again, it increased 49%. So how we frame information can influence people's behaviour and help the environment. And recently there was an analysis of 40,000 tweets, and what they saw was that over time there's been this change in how people phrase the environment. So in 2004, global warming was really popular. It was a really popular choice of wording. And over time, that's now changed to climate change in 2015. And what they're saying now is that we should actually be looking at changing that again because of all the recent stuff that's gone on and the fact that it shouldn't be change, it should be talking about crisis now. So Dr. van der Linden here is now saying that we should change the wording to climate crisis. And the reason for this is that change implies that it's not urgent, it's not an urgent action that's needed, whereas crisis, he thinks, will encourage people more to act. Crisis implies that it's not too late and that something can be done about it, and it should encourage more people to actually actively engage in doing something and changing their behaviour. So that's what they're talking about at the moment. It's a very recent thing that I read about. Decisions are not always decided by us. They reside with the person who designed the form. We don't know our preferences that well, and because of this, we're susceptible to influences from external forces. I thought this was a really interesting quote, because this is the crux of it, really, isn't it? We can actually change behaviour based on how we design things, how we word things, the visual appearance of designs, and that's everyone in this room. You have the power to do that. And things like climate change, I think we can actually change the world if we want to. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found that interesting. There's more books on here which are about choices and decision making if you want to read more. And feel free to contact me as well, get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, you name it. Thank you very much.
Ask Lisa some questions if you have any. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, now we just have one microphone, which is not very good, but Maybe you can ask your questions just very loudly from the back. Sorry.
So I have a question regarding the filter. So do you have any good examples or advice on how to create filter that much reflect on users' emotional preferences or non-rational?
I think with filters, it's a case of making them as efficient as possible rather than emotional. I think the emotional part is the design of the content on the page. You know, the photography that you use, the videos, the way that you phrase your copy, the words that you use, they can convey emotion really well. But filters, I think, are just about getting people to content as quickly and efficiently as possible for them. Does that make sense? And obviously do your user research so that you can identify what filters are actually needed by people to find what they want as well. Okay.
There was a question over here, right?
Yeah. Okay. You know, like TikTok, right? It's basically its whole algorithm is kind of like replacing the user's choices, so they don't have to do anything anymore. Don't you think that's kind of like it might become a new mobile app design trend? Or
How does it replace choices?
So I mean, basically, it's so based on AI that once you figured out what you like, your feed is completely created by this algorithm. You don't, like on Instagram, you have to follow people, you have to decide what you're interested in. Do I follow fashion? Do I follow whatever? And TikTok just replaces that. Like, you have a few actions in the beginning, and this recommender system just gives you, like, you don't have to do any choice anymore. Facebook? No.
Once you have been following few pages, you might not see the latest ones, but the ones that is Facebook deciding you to see.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are doing that, aren't
that's
they?
different. That's like really different. So, because TikTok, you don't have to follow people, you don't have to like these pages. It is like based on a few actions in the beginning. It decides completely how your experience looks like. So in Facebook, it's a recommender system that learns your interests, and TikTok is like completely different. Do you think it might become a trend that all the apps are basically just like trying to replace or like trying to minimize choices?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'd be really interested to know what effect that has on people. You know, does it keep them in that sense of flow for longer? If it's just constantly giving you stuff. I mean, I don't really use TikTok, but I'm aware of it. I'm too old for TikTok. But it's an interesting sort of ethical question as well, isn't it? Because I know that we do get this a lot with things like Facebook and news. You know, if you read the news and then it's prompting you to read news that's similar to things that you've read before, is that really ethical that it's doing that? Should it not be giving you sort of a wide variety of unbiased things? I don't know. I think it could possibly enhance that sense of flow that people have, where you just keep watching and watching and watching because you're not having to choose anything. You're not having to make a decision. That could be a good thing, or a bad thing. I don't know, but possibly we'll see more. I guess if the results from TikTok show that it is an effective thing for engagement, obviously companies will want to copy that. But I don't know, as a user, what do you do though if you want to specifically find something? Like, you've got a subject area that you want to look at. There must be a way to search.
Yeah, you can still explore. Yeah, obviously.
Right.
It's completely like based on machine learning, while the other is like just a recommender system, which is also machine learning, but that learns from your interest. But also, like, you can go on a feed and you have to do nothing, and it just gives you content, like endless content.
Yeah.
Like, I tried it out, and like, even I'm not the target audience, like I spent like it goes on and on and on, and like you have to do nothing. Like, it's crazy.
I guess it's a bit like infinite scroll, isn't it, on e-commerce sites? When you've got infinite scroll, people tend to scroll more just because they don't have to press a button at the end. So you do see that. I guess it would increase engagement and people spend longer on the app by doing that. But I'd be interested to see figures on that, definitely.
No.
Yeah, give me that back.
Okay, change mine.
Like,
Okay.
change.
Okay,
better.
it's different. It's a choice. It's difficult. So, in the relatively at the beginning, you showed a graph indicating that with the growing number of choices, the ability to make choices is reduced. It's being constantly reduced. How do you measure the ability to make choices?
You run experiments, I guess.
So how do
A/B
you-
test, that kind of thing. But I do a lot of qualitative research personally to assess choice and people's ability to make choices on websites. So we do a lot of that to make sure that what's on the website is as optimal as it can be. I guess that's how I go about doing things like that.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah,
Any
it's a
other
difficult
questions?
balance. It doesn't work, does it?
I think it's working. Someone told me it's working, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So when does using heuristics becomes dark pattern?
Can you repeat the question?
When does using heuristics become dark pattern? When it's the designer, isn't it? So it's your choice. I mean, this is a big thing at the moment, isn't it? It's ethics in design, and it all resides in you as a person, I think. Whether you create something that becomes a dark pattern or not is.
As users, sometimes we don't know what we need or want. It's like our decision is being influenced by the seller or the product.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So if your choice is being influenced by them, someone has designed, for example, that website, so it's the designer or the company that have that responsibility to make sure that it's not a dark pattern, it's not unethical. Do you get it? Okay.
we have time for one more question. Or no more questions, that's fine too. Good.
Thank you very much.